Hi, my name is Tara Kachaturoff, and I'm the host of Michigan Entrepreneur, where we feature businesses from startup to stellar. Today, I have as my special guest Surinder Gill, who is the founder of Gill Training Systems. Welcome to the program.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on. You are my first NLP trainer. And
Oh,
before
wow.
we step into our discussion about the business that you have grown over the past many years, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you up to starting this business?
Yeah, sure. So I was a police officer, interestingly enough, for 24 years. I retired early as a sergeant in 2014. The reason I did so was because my wife and I were running retail businesses. We had ice cream stores and fish and chip shops, quite a combination. I wanted to grow that empire, and we got up to 6 locations. And I mean, I was happy with it. It wasn't that it was a problem financially. It was quite financially rewarding, but the lifestyle was not what I wanted for myself. So I had decided that what I was going to do was become a business consultant and start scaling down our retail operations, which now we have done. We have no retail at all anymore. Um, and I wanted to become a business consultant, teaching other entrepreneurs how to grow their brick and mortar locations from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, because it was about leadership and systems. So that's what got me into NLP. Once I took my NLP practitioner training, though, I was transformed as a person, and I knew that I could use these tools to start helping other people with their mindset. So I completely shifted gears and I became an NLP coach, using neuro-linguistic programming and hypnosis to help people with a variety of things. So, and now I'm a trainer. So there it is. In a nutshell, that's my journey.
And that's quite the journey. It's interesting that you started as a police officer and you were also doing businesses. Those are two very different skill sets. And then moving into starting your company as in training others in NLP. Now, to break it down for our audience who may not be familiar, some of people might not be familiar with what NLP is. Can you break that down and explain in a little more detail?
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about neuro-linguistic programming, the actual words. Neuro refers to what's going on in your brain as you are creating internal representations to explain the stimulus in your environment. And we can only do that with our senses, and we only have 5, right? So we can see things, we can feel things, hear things, smell and taste things. And we have our internal dialogue, so the little voice in our head. So it's really about that. Linguistics, that means that what we do is we take words and we apply them to our life experience so that we can recall that information, so that we can build upon that information, and so that we can explain to other people. And language is incredibly powerful for that reason, but it's also can be very limiting because it removes from our ability to perceive all of the data. Why? Because these words compress information into a tiny little packet. So that's the linguistic piece. If you learn language at a really high level, you can not only change your own outcomes because the way you're speaking to yourself might not be ideal, um, you can also influence other people with precision because you just understand language better. So now we've covered neuro-linguistic. Now let's move on to the programming. The programming really means that we are predictable as human beings because we operate in a very patternistic way. And if we look back over the course of our lives, we will find that many of the things that we did when we were younger, that those patterns are repeating themselves across many contexts in our life, even now in adulthood. And that might not be helpful. So as NLP coaches, we can help people with that.
And you're working with people in a variety of areas, everything from anxiety to weight management and so on. Let's go through some of these areas that you actually work with people one-on-one, besides training other people to help them use NLP with their clientele. For example, with anxiety, what might you be doing with languaging to help somebody move through and overcome anxiety?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, I think the first thing to understand is what anxiety truly is. Anxiety is fear of the future. And it's fear of something that has not happened yet and most likely will not happen. It's not fear itself, because fear, we can define fear as something that we're afraid of in real time, which can be a good thing. Because if you're not afraid of something that's happening in real time and you don't adjust your behavior based on that fear, you might put yourself in danger. When people confuse fear with present fear with fear of the future, that's when they produce anxiety. And so, how do we use languaging? Well, that's kind of a loaded question, because there's so much that I could talk to you about. I wouldn't even know where to begin.
But when
So,
you're working with somebody who has anxiety, you're literally just working with your tools are words, right?
yeah, the tools are words, and it's not just words, though. It's also holding of intention. It's also holding a belief for the client that they can, in fact, get past their problem.
Mhm.
Because if I, as the coach, don't 100% believe that you have inside you what you need to resolve your problem, then that's going to be a challenge. And so a lot of communication is unconscious. It's the level of belief that the person who you've hired to help you actually has, because they're, sometimes people refer to this as holding space.
Mhm.
But to
Yeah.
me, it goes beyond holding space, to the point that I tell my students that if you get a client and you have doubts about whether or not you can help them, maybe you shouldn't be taking that client, because it's
Yeah.
not fair.
Mhm.
Right. So you also asked, like, what type of people I help. Well, anxiety is really at the core of it. But when people come to me for things like smoking cessation,
Mhm.
we're dealing with their inability to regulate emotion. When people come to me for weight loss, we're dealing with their inability to regulate emotion. When people come to me and they say, well, I want to grow my business, but I procrastinate. Well, we're dealing with their inability to regulate emotion.
So
So
these problems that we think are like it's the cigarettes, it's the weight, it's I don't know about my business. These are really emotional issues that we're contending with.
yes, these are symptoms of a deeper problem,
I see.
which is also why, when I first got into this work, I was using a lot of hypnosis. And hypnosis is wonderful and it's incredibly impactful. It doesn't necessarily land with everybody as well as it could, because sometimes when we're only using hypnosis, we're dealing with the symptom only. So for example, with a smoking client, if all we deal with is the habit of smoking and we hypnotize the person and fill them with positive suggestions, they may feel incredibly empowered. But for how long? A few weeks, a few months. And then there's a chance that they might go back to that habit. And the reason is because, we may not have dealt with the actual root cause. This is an example I often share, is if you have dandelions in your yard and you mow your grass will look beautiful, but for how long? If you want a beautiful, lush, green, front yard, you're going to have to do something about the root of those weeds and not just trim them at the surface. And so that's really what it's all about. And what I have found is, once I learned this, there's no limit to who I can help. So I help. I mean, as long as it's not a chemical or structural defective issue with the brain, where somebody with a diagnosis like a schizophrenic or somebody like that, who
Mhm.
really shouldn't be in the care of a life coach.
Right,
There
right.
are people out there that need to be in the care of a doctor, and I don't work with those people. What I have found, though, is that the vast majority of people that reach out to me, they have created their issue through ineffective thinking. And I can definitely help them remove some of those ineffective thought patterns and replace them with effective ones. And that can be transformational.
Now, when people are working with you on these various things, are they going into any kind of state like we do under hypnosis where we are in 100% control of ourselves? But is it conversational? What does it feel like to a client when they're working with you?
Yeah. So much of it is conversational with me at this stage. At
Hmm.
one time, 90% of it was hypnotizing people and putting them into a trance, and they'd have their eyes closed. I do use deep hypnotic trance, but I don't do it until the third, and in some cases, even the fourth session. Um, Because for me, what I've noticed is that the bulk of the work is done before I ever get to the point where I hypnotize somebody. And then I use hypnosis as like an adjunct, to solidify the change. So it's like hypnosis for me at this point is like the icing on the cake. It's not the cake itself.
Right, right. Because you work with the thoughts, the thought patterns, and changing behavior
Yeah.
before you do anything else.
Well, yeah, because people are comparing new information to old information, and that's how they're constructing their reality. And the behaviors that they're exhibiting are coming from the reality that they have constructed, and they don't realize it's a construct.
Right.
They think it's real. So the first step, as far as I can tell, as far as I'm concerned, and it's working really, really well. I have not tampered with my signature protocol in 3 years now because it's super effective. What I have learned is that exposing people to this idea that the stories they've been telling themselves are not real empowers them. And
Mhm.
then they begin to think differently. And when they think differently, they respond to a different reality. We use the word reality as though it's real. But the
Right.
truth is, when I say reality, I'm talking about the subjective reality that each of us holds in our mind, because it's different for all of us. So if we can tamper with that reality and replace it with a better one, then we will get better behaviors and we'll get better results, which will result in more empowered feelings, which results in higher self-esteem. And so once a person has higher self-esteem and now they're dealing with a different self-identity, a better self-image, well, then they will produce results in their life that match up with the new self-image because they're currently getting results in their life based on their current self-image.
It's the new you.
It's
You're helping
literally,
find the new you.
yeah, beautifully said.
And the
It's the
thing
new
is
you.
that it's really, it's until you expose yourself to other ideas, you believe all your stories, but
Yeah,
you being there with them helps them see outside their story into a bigger there's more possibility, and people can't always see possibility. I mean, we get our own thinking, we have our little world, and we stay in our little world because it's really safe and it makes sense and everything fits, and I have my
hmm,
excuse codes for everything that's ever happened to me since I was born, and it's
yep,
just a great place. But when you go outside that and listen and work with somebody who does what you do, it expands, and you can let
yeah,
those things fall away, and you don't have those aren't truths. People think everything in their life, every story is a truth, and it's not.
yeah. No, absolutely. It's a
It's just not.
story.
Yep.
Yeah.
So in these various areas, so you're doing everything from people with anxiety, weight management, smoking cessation, pain management, helping people with various aspects of their businesses because you work with a lot of business professionals and executives.
Mhm.
Is there a particular area um, that you have more clientele in than any others, or is it kind of spread all over the place?
Okay, well, that's a really good question because I have two kind of facets to my business. One is I do one-on-one work and I coach people one-on-one.
Hmm.
And I would say that that's pretty much divided, like 30% are anxiety, people with anxiety
Hmm.
or anger management issues or sadness. Um, I mean, I can say depression, but technically I shouldn't be using, clinical definitions. So when people call me and say, "Hey, I'm suffering from depression. Can you help me?" My standard answer to them is, "Well, I cannot treat depression because I'm a life coach. However, I can teach you how to think in a way that will make you happier." Right. So if we take all of those emotional things and we put them into one basket, that'd be about 30%.
Hmm.
And then 30% weight loss, and then probably 30% smoking. And like I mentioned earlier, all of these people that have compulsions, whether it's smoking, drinking, social media addiction, scrolling, pornography, they're all emotional issues. Then I'll have some of the other things that you would expect, a hypnotist to deal with, like a flying phobia,
Right.
a phobia of insects or mice. And I deal with all of those things as well. I've had a lot of success with misophonia. You may not know what that
What's
is.
that?
It's not a common one. So misophonia is when people get really upset or angry at certain sounds. And often, not always, but often they're related to the sounds that people make when they're eating food. So I've had
Yes.
clients that cannot go to restaurants because if someone's slurping their soup, my client's anger would be just so out of control that they would have to leave. So they learned to just avoid certain things. And I've had a lot of success giving, these people their life back. And there's many testimonials on my YouTube channel from people who I've helped with a variety of things, including misophonia.
Yeah. People chewing ice, that can set me up.
Oh, really?
Ice and teeth. It's like, ah. Or, the chalkboard thing. Yeah.
Yes, some of those sounds like I don't like that either. The nails on the chalkboard. It's only really a problem when you start to adjust your life and there's things that you want to enjoy in your life, but you won't allow yourself to go there. Like one of my clients said that for a birthday dinner for this family, they just understood that dad's not going to come. Like, so those types of things, my success rate has been pretty high with those people. It's always interesting because the last person I helped, it wasn't her, it was her mother who had called me, and her mother said, well, we've dealt with the experts and we know that there is no way to fix this. And I
There's
said,
always
well, can I send you some videos from some of my clients? And then I got on the phone with her again and she said, so why is it that the experts are saying that this can't happen and you're producing these results? And I said, well, because I'm not educated enough to know what I can't do.
a way. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I
Can't is
believe that
not
I
in
can
your
help you. Yeah,
can't
I
is
believe
not
that I
part
can
of
help you.
yeah.
Mm.
It's your belief system is stronger than not believing.
Yeah, and if I ever get to the point where I'm conditioned to believe that there are certain things that cannot be fixed, well, then I would likely not be able to produce results for people in some areas that I'm producing right now.
And yeah, and that's exactly why medical professionals can't produce results because they actually believe nothing can be done. That's a common
Mm,
mindset. Common
yeah, many
mindset.
times, yes. Yeah. It's also
So,
why I have, actually, just on that point before we continue, many of my clients I mean, people try the traditional route generally
right.
before they come to someone like myself. So these people whose lives are being transformed, many of them have had years of traditional counseling and therapy. And it took them so far. I wouldn't say that they all say it didn't work. It got them to a certain point, but to actually eliminate their anxiety or panic attacks, they sometimes have to go somewhere else, something that's a little outside the box, which is where NLP and hypnosis reside, I believe.
Are there any circumstances where somebody might be under the care of a doctor, like for a pain situation or something else? Can you still work with them as long as you have an okay from their doctor? If
Yeah,
they're in that
absolutely. And
situation?
for sure. And a good thing, like what I always do is if somebody comes to me with severe pain is I make sure that they've gone to their doctor and make sure that they're cleared. But if I have somebody who's got migraines and they've had the MRIs and the scans and their doctors are saying, look, we don't know what else to do with you, then I'll take that person as a client. I
Mhm.
mean, I'll give you an example. I had a woman one time who had hemorrhoids that they just kept coming back and they wouldn't do any more surgeries. Her doctor told her that she thinks it's coming from her unconscious mind or subconscious mind, she said,
Oh, her
which
doctor
to me,
said that. Wow.
well, yeah, and I was impressed. I was about to say that her doctor recommended she come see me, but that's not true. It wasn't a referral. Her doctor had no idea who I was. But this woman called me. Um, I did my protocol with her, and she's completely clear. Her unconscious mind was producing these symptoms as a form of protection because she'd been abused sexually as a child. And her unconscious mind, this is the theory, and of course, we have no way of knowing if this is 100% true, but I've seen enough patterns like this that my personal belief is that it's true. I'm not telling you that you have to believe it.
Mhm.
Um, but once her unconscious mind recognized that there was safety without having to produce physical symptoms, it stopped producing the physical symptoms and she's completely clear of hemorrhoids. She hadn't come to me. Who knows? Maybe she just would have had to deal with this problem for the rest of her life. We don't know for sure.
And nobody wants
So,
to deal with problems, especially things that affect our just daily happiness.
yeah. And, with pain, what I've noticed what happens is if a person is not really listening to their body, then eventually the unconscious mind will take over and say, okay, this person's just not getting it. And so we have to slow them down or we have to produce safety somehow. So let's produce this pain.
Mhm.
And once people start to figure out what the emotional state is that's bringing back that aching shoulder or that, oh, sometimes my knee acts up. Um, it, I'm telling you, if you just write down what your emotional state is when that happens, over a period of a month or two, if you start to have these aches and pains, you're going to start to see a pattern. And sometimes just the exposure of that pattern will make the problem go away. Just
That's a,
that.
yeah, that's a
Yeah,
great point. Yep. So it gets back to what you said. It's all this
sure. Absolutely.
emotional root.
I believe that that's it.
Um, with some of our time, I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions or apprehension people might have about working with somebody in NLP. Can we talk about two or three things real quick?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, people think, well, they think about hypnosis, losing control, and all that. Can we kind of overlay that to NLP work when you're working with words and some hypnosis? Because people do not understand this world and they make a
Yeah.
lot of assumptions based on crazy things they've seen on TV.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll tell you the two most common ones that I hear. One, when it comes to hypnosis, is it dangerous? I mean, you're going to make me cluck like a chicken. I don't want to give control over my mind to somebody else. I don't think you can hypnotize me because I'm too strong-minded. Here's the truth about hypnosis. It's like a dance between two people. I don't do anything to you. It's cooperation. And so when someone says to me, I can't be hypnotized, what I say to them is, well, hypnosis is really just following direction. So if you're saying that you don't want to be hypnotized, I understand that. But if you say I can't be, that's not something that I would brag about, because that's the equivalent of saying I don't know how to follow instructions. So hypnosis is a relaxed state where your brain waves quiet down to the point where they're operating at roughly the same level as when you're asleep and dreaming, only you're doing it while you're awake. So now you're listening to me talk to you, and these suggestions are going deep into your unconscious mind because you've allowed me to compromise your critical faculty, which is the filter that filters information. So if a smoking client, for example, gets hypnotized by me, and one of the suggestions I give them is that they're addicted to breathing fresh air, and they accept that at a deep unconscious level, the odds of them grabbing, plant material with paper wrapped around it, lighting it on fire, and inhaling dangerous fumes are not very good. So that's hypnosis. Now let's talk about NLP. The most common thing that I hear is that, well, if you're using words like this, it's almost like we're manipulating people. What I would say is that it's the intent that matters. Yes, you can become incredibly influential. I cannot get people to give up a 30-year smoking habit in 2.5 hours unless I know how to be incredibly influential. Could I use my skills of influence for a nefarious purpose? Of course. But I'm a good guide. I don't want to do that. I want to use what I know to make the world a better place. So what I often say to my students is, or when somebody asks me, well, isn't this manipulative, this NLP stuff? What I say is, look, you could take a steak knife and you could do a lot of harm with that steak knife, or you could make your steak dinner a lot more comfortable, right? But we don't blame the knife. We blame the person who's holding the knife if they choose to do something with it that's not good. And there is no way to create anything good by manipulating people, because that implies that it's good for you and not for the other person. That's not ecological. And you will ultimately pay for that because the universe keeps score. So that's kind of a misconception. And some people I know get turned off by NLP because they feel that people are trying to manipulate them, or that they don't want to be seen as a manipulative person. I'm spreading goodwill all the time, and I'm so grateful that I have these tools of influence to be able to do that. So
And the cross thought to that is that they sit in front of a television or they listen to music and they're completely in a trance and they're completely being manipulated by those things with
yeah,
intent. So it's kind of
yeah,
interesting what people think is one thing and it's really something quite different.
yeah,
Those are some great things. And can you step us through real quickly, because I do have a few more questions real quickly on what is the experience of somebody who comes to work with you? How do you work with people, virtual or in person?
yeah,
And how does that all work? Do they
yeah.
come to an office? How does that break that
It's
down?
up to them. For people who live close by, I do have an office that can come to me, but more, probably half, maybe even more than half now of my clientele, I never see face to face because they're all over the English speaking world. So we do it over
Right.
Zoom.
Yeah.
And the program is really tailored to what the person needs. Some people, they work with me one-on-one and they take my practitioner training course. And sometimes they take my bundle offer and do the master practitioner as well. That's level 2. Some people only want to work with me one-on-one. They don't have any interest in taking the group training. Some people just want to do the group training because they want to become coaches. The
And you
only thing,
certify people to do the things that you're doing with your clientele.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I can certify people as NLP practitioners, as master practitioners, as well as certified consulting hypnotists. I do have one other course, but that's invitation only, and that's the prerequisites are level 1 and 2, and that's a little more esoteric teachings and spiritual work, and that's in Mexico. I'm going actually in December of this year.
Sounds like fun.
So yeah, and my NLP practitioner training, the one in June is done online, so it's June 2nd to 7th this year. I'll do one every year that's online. And then the other two, one's in Ottawa, Ontario, and the other one's in Toronto, Ontario. The next one actually is coming up quite soon.
All right.
March.
And one other thing I want to talk about real quick, checking our time. You have a book called Mind Mastery. Can you tell us a little bit about that book and how it's helpful to your audience? And I think in the view of you, you have a view of the book right off to your left. Or
Yeah, I don't have a copy of it here, but I do have this that I use sometimes when I go to different fairs. So
Mind
I
Mastery. All
put
right.
that there. Yeah, so I wrote that book because people seem to be quite fascinated by my story. They said things to me like, so you were a police officer and then you owned restaurants and now you're doing this? Like, I don't understand. And I had to hear that several times before I realized that this was a bit of a story. Because to me, it just felt like, yeah, I got bored. I wanted to reinvent myself. So I'm doing something new. I didn't think it was a big deal. But other
It's one
people
of the
seem
reasons
to.
I wanted you on the show,
Oh, really?
because I love your background and in all transparency, I've known you a couple years. Um, I'm not your client, but I know you from other organizations I'm in with you, and I have taken training from you, so I know the quality of your training. Um,
Hmm.
and when you had mentioned you were a police officer, I was like, wait, what? Like you had
Yeah.
all these other things, and I found out even more stuff, as I was reviewing for our interview, and it was like, wow, this background is so helpful because you can help you understand people across such a broad spectrum.
Yeah, and a lot of people had that type of reaction. So I decided to write a book about my story and also incorporate into it some things that people could do to start improving their lives and making progress. And the feedback that I'm getting from the book is that they like that it was like a journey from me talking all the way through my life. But at the same time, it wasn't just a biography. It was also, here are some of the things that mistakes I made working with clients. Here's some of the things that have worked for me. Here's some things that you can try to to improve your life. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag.
And I mean, and I love as an entrepreneur that you do have a book. It's such an important part of growing a business and getting yourself out there in another way and being
Mm-hmm.
accessible to even more people. I've really enjoyed our time together as we've talked about your business, a little bit about NLP and what it is, the kinds of people you work with. As my final question to you, what would be your advice to entrepreneurs?
Yeah, my advice would be the real progress happens from the things that you're doing when nobody's looking, the things that aren't really a lot of fun, maybe the things that seem tedious. And the negative emotion that you feel when you're doing that stuff will cause you to not be as effective. So if you look out into the future, this is what I do all the time. Go out into the future, look at your end game. What is it that I want to achieve? How will I feel when I've achieved this? And then take those feelings and bring them into your body right now. Yeah, a quote from Neville Goddard comes to mind. He said, live as though the wish is fulfilled. Not that it will be fulfilled, but live as though it is. So everything that I do it with the emotional state of how I will feel when it's complete, but I want to feel it now. What I won't do is say, once I achieve that, I'll be happy, right? Once I get 100 people a year after year through my NLP practitioner training, I'll be happy. No, no, no. I'm happy now knowing that that's an eventuality.
Well
I could
said.
talk about that for a long time, but in a
Maybe
nutshell,
we'll have you back in the future to talk a little more about that, because that is a really interesting topic, and I love that topic. But thank you
yeah.
so much for being a guest today, Surinder Gill of Gill Training Systems. If you'd like more information about our program, please visit us at MichiganEntrepreneurTV.com. Please join me again in the future when I interview another enterprising entrepreneur. Until then, wishing you the best of business.